Hello brewers, it's time for makgeolli talk. Time for me to talk to myself and you about makgeolli. Today's topic is it ready? How can you tell if your brew is ready to bottle? If you like this video, please click that like button and subscribe. So let's get into the question today. Is it ready? How can you tell if your brew is ready? It's one of those questions that every brewer is anxious about. I've gotten that question a lot. Am I too early? Am I too late? So first of all, you want to understand your recipe. What's the basic expected brewing time for your recipe given average temperatures and so on? Now, of course, it'll be variable, and we'll talk about the tests you have to do later. But first of all, let's understand what's the standard length of time. The base recipe is single stage brew, danyanju, with hard steamed rice. That's gotubob. And the ratio of rice to water is 1 kilogram of rice to 1 liter of water. So that's the standard recipe, and you should expect that brew to be done in around 7 days. So what are the variables? If it's cooler, it'll take longer. And if it's hotter, the fermentation will be faster. It'll be done quicker. Also, if your ratio of, if you have more water than rice, it'll brew faster. If you have less water, it'll brew slower. And of course, if you are brewing a multiple stage recipe, that'll extend the brewing time as well. So that's what to expect in general. But what you really want to know is about your particular brew at a given point in time. How can you tell if it's ready to bottle? So the most basic test is the match test. You light a match and you lower it into the fermentation container, and if it goes out, then that means it's still fermenting. Do not bottle it yet. If the match stays lit, it means it's time to bottle. This is an early indicator because it detects when there's a lot of fermentation going on, there's a lot of carbon dioxide, it fills up the top of your fermentation container and it puts out the match. And so if the fermentation slows down, it might still be fermenting somewhat, but if it slows down, there won't be enough carbon dioxide to put out the match. It'll stay lit. So this is an early indicator. Definitely do not bottle if the match goes out. That means you're in the middle of fermentation for sure. But it might, if you just follow the match test, you might be bottling earlier than you want to. What are some other tests you can use? Well, you should use all of your senses. So, for example, you can taste your brew every day, and when it switches from sweet to sour, that's a test. That's an indication that it's time to bottle. That's a very traditional indicator. You could also listen to your brew. You'll hear a lot of bubbles at the beginning, and it'll diminish over time, and that, with experience, you can use that as a guide for when to bottle, when the sound diminishes. And of course, you can look at your brew. If you brew in a clear container, like I do, you can observe the layers in your brew. The ideal situation at the end of the brewing process is to see 3 layers: top layer of rice, middle layer sort of clear, and bottom layer are the bits of rice that have fallen down from the top layer to the bottom. And I've noticed if you wait a few days after that, you'll end up with basically 2 layers: top layer of rice, and then as the rice falls down to the bottom, you'll basically end up with 1 layer of mixed liquid and rice at the bottom. So that's a pretty late indicator. If your brew is at that stage, you're pretty sure that it's done. It should be quiet. You shouldn't see a lot of bubbling or hear a lot of bubbling at that stage. And another indication is the texture itself. If you've been stirring it at various points in the brewing process, you can feel how liquid the brew is, how much the rice is broken down. And in the end, the rice should be completely broken down. That would be ideal. That would tell you that the brew is complete as well. So use all of your senses, and this will help refine your intuition. You'll have more than one indicator to tell you that the brew is done. You won't have to rely on one single thing. Use all of your senses and the match test, and you'll be really sure that the brew is ready. Other thing to remember is that this is a matter of taste. You might like the brew, how it tastes when you bottle early, or you might prefer how it tastes when you bottle late. So when you bottle early, you're going to get a sweeter taste with more carbonation. And when you bottle late, you're going to get a drier taste, or maybe sour. If you're adding additional yeast, it should be a dry taste if you bottle late, and you'll have less carbonation as well, bottling late. Other difference will be that an early bottling often has a harsher taste, might need to sit in the fridge longer. Later bottling should be smoother. So even though the decision seems so important of when to bottle, you don't need to be anxious about it. In my case, I know that none of my brews have been perfect, but I also know that most of my brews have been tasty. Even though I didn't know exactly when to bottle them, it was close enough, and it turned out you end up with a tasty brew. And the more you watch and listen and taste your brew as it's going on, the more you'll understand the best point for you, for your taste, when you should bottle it. Hope you found this interesting. If you have any suggestions for determining when to bottle your brew, please put them in the comments. Thank you for watching.